The rain fell the way October rain always does in Seattle. Steady, soft, not dramatic, just persistent enough to make everything feel a little heavier, a little colder by the time the night was done. Puddles spread across the wet concrete of Pike Place sidewalks, reflecting the warm glow from restaurant windows in fractured amber before the next drop broke them apart. The Emerald Room had sat on the corner of First and Pike for 12 years. Its tall windows fogged from the inside, holding the breath and warmth of 60 or 70 people against the chill outside. Through that soft haze, candlelight drifted, gentle, golden, making everything look more solid than it really was. Michael Torres held the door open with his shoulder, one hand resting lightly on his daughter's back, guiding her inside with the careful attention of someone who knew this moment mattered. The host stand was just past the entrance. The young woman behind it glanced up, registered Michael's blazer, borrowed, sleeves a touch too long, shoulders a half-inch too wide, and smoothed her expression into professional welcome. "Reservation for Torres," he said. "Of course, right this way." Sophie walked beside him, chin lifted just a little. She wore a deep green velvet dress bought 2 sizes too big last Christmas, so she could grow into it. Black tights, her best shoes with the small silver buckles she saved for occasions that felt important. Her dark hair was in 2 braids. Michael had watched a YouTube tutorial 5 times the night before to get the parts straight. They weren't perfect, but they were close. The dining room stretched long and warm, tables draped in cream linen, stemware catching candlelight and scattering it in thin, bright lines across the walls. A string quartet played in the far corner. Something classical Michael didn't know the name of, but he recognized it was good. That was enough. They were seated near the window. Maybe luck, maybe courtesy. He didn't ask. The menus were heavy, bound in soft leather. Sophie took hers with both hands the way he'd told her to and said, "Thank you," in her clearest voice. "You're very welcome, sweetheart," the server replied. Michael watched her open the menu and start reading. Her lips moved slightly over the French words she didn't know, sounding them out. Her brow furrowed in concentration. He straightened the cuff of the borrowed blazer, his coworker Jamal's, left hanging in the locker room since last year's holiday party. Jamal had handed it over Wednesday afternoon without fanfare. "You clean up nice," he'd said. Michael had answered, "I look like I'm wearing your coat, which looks good on both of us." The fork slipped when Sophie reached for her water. It hit the edge of her bread plate and clattered to the floor, impossibly loud in the quiet room. A couple at the next table glanced over. 2 older women behind them paused mid-sentence. Sophie froze. She was 9 years old. She had been told this was a nice place. Nice places had rules. She had just broken one. Everyone had heard. Her chin trembled. Her eyes went wide and still. The look Michael knew meant she was fighting tears hard. He reached across and touched her hand before she could pull it away. "Hey," he said softly. She looked at him. "Happens to everybody." He said it plain, no drama. "Server's gonna bring another one." The server did. He crouched, picked up the fallen fork without a word, produced a fresh one from the fold of his towel and set it beside her plate. "Can I get you anything from the bar while you decide?" he asked Michael. "Just water, thanks." When the server left, Sophie exhaled. The tremble eased. She looked around at the candles, the people in good clothes, the slow rhythm of the room, and her face shifted from embarrassment to something quieter, closer to wonder. "It's pretty," she said. "It is," Michael agreed. She turned back to the menu. He watched her a moment, then opened his own. 3 years, 7 months, and 9 days had passed since the morning Michael sat in the hallway outside room 312 at Swedish Medical Center and understood, cold and clear, that the life he'd built was about to change shape forever. Maria had been 42. The diagnosis came in March. By August, she was gone. He didn't tell the story often or easily. He told Jamal once, late on a Friday after a double shift. He'd told Sophie's school counselor the following fall, when they met to talk about why Sophie sometimes went very quiet during group activities. He didn't tell it at the loading dock. He didn't tell it at parent-teacher conferences. He kept it in the place inside him where the most important things lived, and he got up every morning at 4:45. The warehouse job at Cascade Freight paid decent for what it was, 6 to 3:30, 5 days a week, lifting, sorting, scanning. His hands had thickened, calloused in ways the younger version of himself, the one who'd done 2 years at community college before dropping out when Maria got pregnant, would have been surprised by. The math had changed. He worked a shift, picked Sophie up from after-school care at 4 o'clock, made dinner by 6 o'clock. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, after she was asleep, he drove for a delivery app, mostly restaurant runs, 3 or 4 hours. The medical bills hadn't been a sudden disaster. They were slow, steady, a drain that shrank by $250 some months and grew by $500 the month the car needed brakes, or Sophie needed new boots, or the water heater started leaking. He kept a notebook, a plain spiral on the kitchen counter, columns for every expense: groceries, school fees, utilities, minimum payments, left side outgoing, right side running, balance. The numbers rarely lined up the way he wanted. But in the margins, in lighter handwriting, were other things. Sophie reading 2 grades above level. Her joke about the penguin that still made him laugh. The day she'd asked, unprompted while they watched a documentary, "Dad, do you think Mom would like this?" He'd said yes. She'd nodded like it was useful information and kept watching. He made her lunch every morning, cut the crusts off her sandwiches, not because she asked, but because Maria always had. It felt like carrying something forward. Most days he slipped a note into her lunchbox, a pun, a bad drawing of a a reminder she'd have a good day. His braiding was clumsy. He'd watched videos, practiced on one of Sophie's stuffed animals, asked Jamal's wife Elena to show him in person one Saturday. She demonstrated twice and said he was doing better than most dads she knew. He believed her because he needed to. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't performing struggle. He just did what the day asked, then did it again tomorrow. Some evenings when the apartment was quiet and Sophie slept, he sat at the kitchen table with his notebook and black coffee and felt, without a perfect word for it, the full weight and the full worth of the life he was holding together. It started on a Tuesday. He was tucking Sophie in when she asked, not for the first time, but differently, more carefully, if they could go to a fancy restaurant someday. Not super fancy, she added quickly, like that made it reasonable. Just one where they bring bread first. Elena's mom took her to a place with bread and butter shaped like a flower, like a little rose. He looked at her, small person in mismatched pajamas, hair loose, completely serious. "We can do that," he said. He looked up the Emerald Room the next morning on break. Prefix dinner was $98 per person. He closed the browser, opened it again an hour later, sat with the number for days, running it against the notebook. On Sunday, he called and booked for the following Friday, giving the name Torres in a voice steadier than he felt. He borrowed the blazer from Jamal on Wednesday, bought Sophie's tights Thursday on the way home, sale rack at a shop on Pine Street, $12. On Thursday night, after she was asleep, he watched a 15-minute video on fine dining etiquette, which fork, how to signal the server. He took 3 notes in the notebook, felt briefly silly, then decided silly was better than ignorant. He never told her the prices, only that they were going somewhere nice. She should wear the green dress and good shoes and say thank you to the server every time. Every time, she asked. Every time, he answered. She was 36 and had been in meetings since 6:45 a.m., not unusual, and tired in the way that comes from constant judgment. Every call required judgment. Every report required judgment. Langford Ventures, her father's firm, hers since he stepped back 5 years ago, didn't let its CEO simply show up. It demanded precision, decisiveness, correctness. She was all 3. They cost. Her name was Claire Langford. She'd grown up in a Madison Park house with lake views and a housekeeper who'd been there since before Claire was born. Lakeside School, then Stanford, then Wharton. 2 years at McKinsey before her father called her home. Her younger brother, Ethan, died in a hiking accident 4 years ago. 28, a fall on the Wonderland Trail in Rainier. Claire had been in Singapore closing a deal when her mother called. She took the next flight, landed at SeaTac at dawn, went straight to her parents' house. She didn't cry until 3 days later, alone in her condo, when she found an old text from Ethan she'd never answered, a dumb meme about coffee. She sat on the kitchen floor and cried until there was nothing left. She came to the Emerald Room most Friday evenings when nothing else demanded her. 3 blocks from her condo. Standing reservation, corner table, glass of Sauvignon Blanc, seasonal menu. She came alone, sometimes read, sometimes didn't. The evening passed in managed quiet she'd learned to accept as close enough to peace. Tonight she arrived at 7:10. Her VP of Acquisitions, Mark Ellison, had been supposed to join. He texted at 6:55, flight from Denver delayed. So she had the corner table alone, second place setting cleared by the time her wine arrived. She opened her book, didn't read. The couple next to her argued softly about a cruise. Two older women behind her discussed someone named Margaret, who'd made bad choices about a condo in Maui. Claire tuned them out, old skill. Then she noticed the table by the window. Not suddenly. Attention drifted there the way it sometimes does, pulled by something steady, resonant. A man in a blazer that didn't quite fit, sitting straight, careful, holding the menu with both hands. Beside him, a small girl in a green velvet, reading her own menu with fierce concentration. Claire set her book down, watched without staring, the way you can in a restaurant when candlelight sits between you. She watched him ask what she wanted, tilt his head to listen. Watch the girl point, hesitate, point again. Watch the fork fall, the girl freeze, the father reach across and say something low that eased her shoulders. Claire didn't know their story. She knew only what she saw. But for a moment, she had the sharp sense she was watching someone do something very hard while making it look simple. Dinner was good. Sophie ordered the roasted chicken, described in 3 lines of elegant prose involving words like confit and haricots verts, but turned out to be chicken and green beans. She ate with serious pleasure. Michael ordered the salmon, $34, safely within the night's budget after he'd quietly ruled out the $46 short rib special. He said nothing about it. They talked about school, the book Sophie was reading, a fantasy about a girl who talked to ravens, whether the quartet was playing movie music. It sounds like the part where something big's about to happen, Sophie said. Michael listened. You might be right. She smiled, real, eyes crinkling, and he felt the familiar certainty that everything he did was worth it for exactly this. The server brought dessert menus. Sophie opened hers. Eyes moved down the page. Michael watched her face. He'd budgeted $24 for 2 desserts based on the online menu. But the fall card was different. The cheapest was $18. The one Sophie stopped on, warm chocolate torte with salted caramel and vanilla gelato, was $26. He saw her read the price, read it again, saw her face settle. Not dramatic, just quiet acceptance. I'm not that hungry anymore, she said. He understood instantly, the same math he'd done since he was old enough to read price tags. Okay, he said, closed his menu. Outside, rain tapped the window. A cab slid past, taillights red in the wet. He caught the server's eye, made the small, circular gesture he'd practiced. Check, please. The server returned quickly, set the leather presenter down, then paused. Sir, I wanted to let you know your bill has been taken care of tonight. Michael looked up. Your dinner? Settled. Including dessert if your daughter would still like one. Michael glanced at the presenter, no bill inside, looked at the server. By who? The server nodded toward the corner. Subtle. A guest, asked to stay anonymous, said to enjoy the rest of your evening. Michael was quiet. Sophie watched him, then the server, trying to decode. He turned slowly, found the corner table. A woman there, mid-30s, dark hair in a neat knot, glass of white wine, open book she wasn't reading. She was looking at him, not pitying, not soft, level, steady, like someone who'd thought, decided, acted, and didn't need a performance of thanks. She gave a single small nod. He held her gaze a moment, then looked at Sophie, still waiting for information, and said, I think someone was really kind to us tonight. Sophie turned to look, turned back. Absolutely, the server said. They stayed another 25 minutes. Sophie ate the chocolate torte with careful, delighted focus, identifying the caramel by taste before checking the menu again. Asked what torte meant. The server explained. She nodded like she was filing it away. When they stood to leave, Michael helped Sophie with her coat, buttoned the top button when her fingers fumbled, straightened the collar. He picked up the small to-go bag the server had quietly packed, about a third of her chicken, save for reasons she hadn't explained. They walked toward the door. The corner table was close. He hadn't planned to speak. But as they passed, she looked up. He stopped. Excuse me, he said. She met his eyes up close, Her face was more particular, more guarded. "I wanted to thank you," he said, voice level, no performance. "That was generous. It meant a lot tonight." "I'm glad," she said. Simple, no deflection. Then Sophie, standing just behind his elbow, watching adult exchanges with her usual focus, stepped forward, reached up, and hugged the woman around the waist. Claire Langford went still for half a second. Then her arms came around the girl, careful, like holding something fragile and unexpected. Sophie let go, stepped back. "Thank you for the chocolate thing," she said. "It had 3 tastes at once." "It did," Claire answered. Her voice had shifted, slight but real, the edge of something larger. "My name's Sophie." "Claire, that's a pretty name." "Thank you," Sophie considered. "I'll call you Claire." Outside, rain fell on the old brick street. Michael buttoned his collar, Jamal's collar, still a half size too big, and put his hand on Sophie's shoulder. He looked at the woman at the corner table one more time. She had turned back to her book, wasn't reading, was looking out through the fog glass at the rain. Her expression was something he couldn't quite name. Not sorrow, not joy. Something between, something that had been still a long time and had just moved. He guided Sophie to the door. He was already at the warehouse by 6:15 the next morning, breaking down a pallet of electronics, when his phone buzzed. Unknown Seattle number. He almost let it go, probably warranty scam or debt collector. But he answered, "Mr. Torres." He recognized the voice, level, direct. "Yes." "Claire Langford, I hope this isn't too early. I got your number from the restaurant. I asked them to check the reservation. I wanted to be upfront about that." He thought, slightly intrusive, also honest about being intrusive. That counted. "It's okay. I'd like to talk with you about something, if you have a few minutes." He stepped away from the pallet, found a quiet corner near the loading dock where cold air slipped under the door and his breath showed. Her brother's name, she said, was Ethan. Ethan Langford, died 4 years ago. 3 years ago, after time figuring out what she actually wanted to do, she'd started the Ethan Langford Foundation. Practical support for single-parent households in the Puget Sound region. Partnerships with nonprofits, employers, community centers. Small, but real. She wanted to grow it. She wasn't offering charity. She said it plainly. He was glad. She was offering a job, program coordinator for a new initiative, structured support for single parents, financial coaching, job resources, peer groups, salary comparable to his current combined income, hours more predictable. He'd need new skills, facilitation, reporting, budgeting. She'd provide training. She'd watched him for 40 minutes in a restaurant, made an inference. New inferences could be wrong. "Why me?" he asked. Not self-doubt, real question. "Because you were doing something hard, and you were doing it with care. That's what this work needs. Skills can be taught. Care is rarer." He was quiet, cold air moved. Somewhere a forklift beeped. He thought about the notebook on his counter, the columns that never quite balanced. Thought about Sophie eating chocolate torte like she was memorizing it. "I'd need to think about it." "Of course, and I'd need references. I'm not trying to be cold." "You're not. I'll send 2 names, people I've worked with." He called them Sunday while Sophie was at Elena's house. First was Barbara Chen, who ran a job training program in White Center. Spoke about Claire with earned respect. Second was Marcus Reed, a family services caseworker in Renton. She doesn't show up with a check and her name on a plaque. She shows up and does the work. That's different. Michael called Claire Monday morning. "I'll do it." The first few months, he was genuinely bad at facilitation. He'd spent years believing if you worked hard and kept quiet, that was enough. Turns out showing up was only half. The other half was standing in a community center basement in front of 23 single moms and explaining, in plain language, how to read a credit report and dispute errors. First session, he read from notes, voice too low. A woman named Rosa, 42, raising 3 kids after her husband left, asked about wage garnishment. He went off script to answer, lost his place, ended early. Claire, sitting in back in jeans and sweater, blending in, walked up afterward. "You lost them when you went back to the notes." "I know. That question about garnishment, best part of the night." He thought about it on the bus home. Next month, he brought index cards. Key points only. Let questions drive. Better, not great, better. By summer, the Renton group grew from 23 to 41. He added a co-facilitator, Jamal's cousin Louise, who'd navigated foreclosure and come out knowing exactly what that felt like. Luis was warm where Michael was steady. They covered the room between them. Claire attended irregularly, unannounced, sat in back, took notes, shared observations afterward, direct, never unkind. She took the work seriously, not for optics, but for whether it worked. In August, they drove it together to a resource fair in Tacoma. Long drive. They talked the way people do after months of shared work, but no real unguarded conversation. She told him about Ethan, not the accident, but who he'd been, how he laughed at bad puns, called every Sunday just to ask what her week looked like. Sorry, she said, I do that sometimes. Forget who I'm talking to. It's okay, who were you talking to? She watched the highway pass. My mom. Ethan used to call her Sundays. After he died, she kept her phone beside her every Sunday morning for almost a year, just in case. He didn't speak. No words matched that image, but he understood the shape of grief, the way it settles in certain hours, certain sounds, certain empty chairs. They drove in silence, comfortable. That surprised him most. The quiet had shifted, somewhere between professional colleagues and something else. 5 years after that rainy October night, the Ethan Langford Foundation ran in 14 cities across 4 states. It had supported more than 5,200 single-parent households. Its model, peer networks, financial coaching, employer partnerships, had been referenced in 3 policy reports and 1 Senate hearing on family economic security. Michael gave that testimony, flew to D.C. in June, sat before a subcommittee in a suit that actually fit, spoke 12 minutes without notes, answered questions 40 minutes after. Calm, not performance, just truth. The foundation's annual benefit was always the second Friday in October, when Seattle felt most itself, rain soft on the water, city lights blurred and warm. This year, it was in the ballroom of a hotel on Pine Street. The room held people from partner organizations, donors, a few reporters Claire managed carefully. Sophie was 14 now, insisted on coming. Over 5 years, she'd become someone with strong opinions, accurate ones, stated confidently. At 12, she'd found the foundation file in the kitchen drawer, read his early notes from the Renton sessions, and asked, Dad, why didn't you tell me you were nervous? I wasn't nervous. Long look, maybe a little. Tonight, she wore the green velvet dress, grown into, then passed. Michael had taken it to a tailor on Broadway who let out seams, added matching fabric at the hem. Sophie stood while the woman pinned and said, I've been wearing this since I was 9. Did you know that? Like it was exactly right. Speeches started at 8:15. Michael spoke third after the board chair's welcome. 12 minutes. He talked about the years, about Rosa from Renton, now a certified financial counselor herself, about parents who taught him, while he tried to teach them, what it really meant to hold a life together when systems moved too slow. He didn't mention a rainy night at the Emerald Room. That story wasn't his to tell here. Sophie told it. She'd asked to speak. Claire had agreed without asking Michael first, which he noticed and about which he said nothing. Sophie stood at the podium in her green dress with its added hem, chin raised the same way she'd carried it into the restaurant 5 years before. I was 9, she said. I dropped a fork and tried not to cry because I thought I'd broken a rule. My dad pretended not to notice. He just said it happens to everybody. No big deal. The room quieted. That's what I remember most. Not the food or the place or someone paying our bill. I remember my dad looked at me when I was embarrassed and told me it was okay without making it a thing. She paused, looked down, then up. I think that's what the foundation does. It doesn't make a big deal. It just shows up, says it's okay, and helps make the next part easier. She stepped back. The room held quiet one more second, then applause. Outside the tall windows, October rain fell on Seattle, light, persistent. Brick sidewalks dark and shining, puddles catching streetlight glow, holding it briefly before the next drop. Michael looked across the room at Claire. She stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching Sophie with an expression he'd learned to read. The look she wore when something landed right. She caught his eye. A small movement crossed her face. If you knew to look, a smile. He looked back at his daughter, gathering herself at the podium, squaring her shoulders in green velvet. Somewhere in the city tonight, in a restaurant with fogged windows and candlelight, another family sat at a table that felt too big. Another parent calculated costs while pretending to study the menu. Another child looked around a new room with wide eyes, learning the rules. The question was always the same: was anyone watching? Life lesson. The deepest value in life isn't measured by titles, bank accounts, or how perfectly we control our world. It's in the quiet, steady care we give when no one's watching, the way we show up for the people who depend on us, the way we choose kindness without needing credit, and the humility to see that every life, no matter how different from ours, carries its own weight and worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is notice someone doing the hard, ordinary work of holding things together and offer a hand, not out of pity, but out of recognition that we're all building something fragile and human in the same city. That small act of seeing can change everything. If this story touched you about quiet strength, unexpected kindness, and the beauty of lives that intersect when they're ready, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. Hit the like button if it resonated, leave a comment with what stayed with you, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Your support keeps these heartfelt tales coming. Thank you for being here.